Did?
Yeah, he did.
That's true. That's a good word. Thanks, Will. All right.
So, yeah.
Oh, you want to keep going?
Yeah.
All right, you did great. Let's leave it at that. Sometimes the stuff that God gives you, you have to leave it at that and not add your own. I have the same problem. So, welcome everyone again to Living Faith. Today we are continuing in our sermon series called Trash, going through the things, just the really deep, dark sin things that we give ourselves to. To be really honest, as we jumped into this sermon series, I kind of expected it to be lighter than it is. I don't know why. Like, we're going through the 7 deadly sins. Of course, that's kind of heavy. I was just like, oh yeah, it's just these things. But honestly, like, even just talking about these very like broad level sin issues, I've been really struck by like how many of these things are alive in me, you know? It's good to be constantly confronted with some of this stuff and just say like, okay, I'm still a work in progress. God's still doing this stuff in me. It's so good. And today is no different. So we've been talking through these things, the 7 deadly sins, which that list, like we've said, is not actually written out in 7 things. It's not like God gave Moses the 10 commandments and God gave Jacob the 7 deadly sins. It's not that. This is just, in church history, church leaders have gotten together and been like, what are the biggest like stumbling blocks for the church? And these 7 things are the things that they've kind of came down to hundreds of years ago in Turkey. They came down to laziness, anger, gluttony, pride, lust, greed, and jealousy. And those things are not just things that like kind of hurt us. Those are things that completely destroy us. They rot us from within when we give ourselves to them. And I think some of these things we don't even know are happening. So today we're talking about greed. And greed, or covetousness is another way to say it, is an excessive desire for material possessions or wealth, often elevating those things above God. So kids, let me ask you guys a question really quick. So what would you say is something that you're really greedy for, that you just always want more of? What do you guys think? Stuffed animals, yeah. What about you, Ben? Candy, yep. What about you guys? You got something going, I can see it. What are you thinking? Poppets? Yeah, I know, you could always, there's never too many poppets. I mean, I guess there are, that's kind of what we're talking about, but yeah. What about baby dolls? Yep. Yeah, sometimes like adults, have you guys ever collected something and you're like, I just always want the next one, and there's no amount of like the holy grail of things that you get just doesn't scratch the itch still, because it's just about getting more, right? Adults, what are things like that for you? Candy, stuffies, poppets, coffee, yeah. Dresses, yep. What else? Cameras, yeah. Guitars, yeah. I heard a saying one time that was, you already have the thing that you said would make you happy. Like, that hurts, right? Like, that's so hard. This idea of greed is throughout all of Scripture, especially in the Old Testament. There's a ton. Proverbs just hits you over the head with it again and again. Proverbs 28:25 says, the greedy stir up conflict, but those who trust in the Lord will prosper. So that's putting greed against people who trust in the Lord. Isn't that crazy? Like, the greed is the opposite of trusting in the Lord. Proverbs 15:27 says, the greedy bring ruin to their households, but the one who hates bribes will live. Isaiah 57:17, I was enraged by their sinful greed. I punished them and hid my face in anger, yet they kept on in their willful ways. Like, there's this ongoing thing of people being greedy and God hating that greediness, you know, and still blessing people in the midst of it, but hating that greed. And greed or greedy show up in the Bible about 50 times. But even outside of the times that the word is used, there are so many things where greed is the core of it, you know? If we look at the first sin in the Bible, like from the very beginning, we see Adam and Eve, like that whole story is just full of greed, right? So God gives Adam and Eve this incredible, perfect garden, this place to live that is just literally perfect. And instantly they want more. Which is crazy. To us, it feels crazy, but also I think we would do the exact same thing. So Satan actually tells them, you can have more. He gave you the garden, but there's so much more that you can have. In Genesis 3, verse 1, it says, he said to the woman, did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? And we see Eve kind of hit back a little bit and kind of go back and forth. And then verse 4, Satan goes, you will not certainly die, the serpent said to the woman, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. So you guys see the greed there? Where Adam and Eve have all of this stuff and they just want a tiny little bit more. And I would actually say in those verses, just those 3 verses we just read, I think we see all 7 of these sins, right? We see jealousy, that God and Satan know more than we do. We have anger, that God might be keeping something from us. There's the gluttony and having all this stuff, but still going after more of it and just trying to get more and more. The pride of feeling like we know better than God. We can even see a lust for wisdom that we're not supposed to have, or a lust for knowledge that we're not supposed to have. Laziness to not look into what we're told. They're not fact checking this thing with God. But I think the core of this that we see is greed, is just, what if I had that one more thing? What if I could have just a step past what God wanted for me? And that goes through so much of the Old Testament. Cain and Abel, kids, I know you guys have talked about them recently. So Cain and Abel, Cain was greedy for more of God's favor, and he slayed his brother for it, Lot's greed caused him to choose a land that he really wasn't supposed to be in because it was a better, nicer looking land, and it made him walk away from God. Joseph's brothers were greedy for attention, and they sold their brother into slavery for it. It's kind of a big one. Pharaoh was so greedy for more power that he enslaved the Israelites to put him to work. Throughout so much of the Old Testament here, we see that. And then even you get to the 10 Commandments, everyone has seen the 10 Commandments, right? See if you can hear the greed in this. You shall have no other gods before me. Why did he have to tell us that? Because we would want other gods. Because we have God who's perfect, and we're yeah, but there's lesser gods, I could also have them. There's demonic stuff, I want that too. You shall not bow down to idols or worship them. It's greed to want more good stuff from things that might give you good stuff. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Generally, the people who need to work 7 days a week, why is that? More money. There might be some identity issues in there too, but yeah, I think a lot of times it comes down to more money. You shall not commit adultery. That's straight out just wanting something that you're not supposed to have. That's greed. Yeah. You shall not steal. That's kind of the definition of greed, wanting it so bad that you won't even pay for it. You just take it. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, wife, servant, ox, donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor in verse 17. Being consumed by wanting something so bad that you're willing to steal it from somebody that has it. That's crazy. 6 out of 10 of these are directly related to greed. And I think a couple of them are pretty close. You shall not murder. How many murders have we seen over money or over property or over some kind of dispute? In our neighborhoods. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. How many people have used God's name for power? That is just constant throughout history. And then the 2 that don't even super line up, honor your father and mother and don't lie. I think everyone in this room has done that out of greed, At some point has lied to get something, or has, been greedy for more, so we didn't honor our parents in that. It is just this core thing. And I think this is something that is so baked into our culture that we don't even see it. If you go through this whole list, go back up here, jealousy, anger, gluttony, pride, lust, laziness, greed. I don't know about you, but if I were to rate those as most an issue in my life to least an issue, I think greed would be relatively low on that list because compared to most Americans, I'm really not greedy. But that is compared to most Americans. Like, compared to the most greedy people in human history, I'm not that bad. Yeah, no offense. I love our country. I love our people. But right? Like, that's kind of like we are literally, it's baked into our culture in every way, shape, and form. So it's always wanting more money, more power, more influence, more stuff, more. So what is greed really? I read the definition earlier. It's in the notes in the app if you want to look at that. But it's just an excessive desire for material possessions or wealth, often elevating those things above God. But just like an obsession for more is pretty close to gluttony, right? Like those two feel like they're very similar, but there's a big difference between the two. And I think there's a verse here that's kind of our core verse today, Colossians 3:5, that tells us where greed separates itself. Like, what is greed really? Colossians 3:5. So kids, I'm going to ask you guys, see if you can figure out what greed is in this, okay? Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. So what is greed, guys? So it says, which means it's a definition of. So what's the word right after which is? Idolatry, right? So can somebody explain to me what idolatry is? Anyone? Yeah, an image of something that you think is higher than God. Yeah. It's just something to worship, right? So I was going to say in biblical times, but in other parts of the world today, they literally make idols that they worship. So idolatry is worshiping something other than God. And for us, I think like we're not carving little statues, but like greed is the thing that we idolize. Like we idolize money, power, fame. That is our idol in this world. So really, if we are greedy for more money, then in a way we're kind of worshiping that money. Like we're not expecting God to take care of our needs. We're not pressing into what he calls us to. We're trying to get more money. And that becomes the thing that we worship, that our heart pours out for. If we're greedy for more power, then we are worshiping the fact that people would follow us. You know? And today, you might not call it power as much as you would call it influence or likes or followers. And the more followers we have, the more we worship the idea of being followed. And that's sad, you know? The more time that we try to get from somebody, like, have you guys ever seen somebody in a relationship where the person they're with is constantly trying to get all of their time, and if they don't get all of their time, it's not enough? Like, that's greed. Of like, eventually, it kind of gets to the place of like worshiping that person, which is really scary, because I don't know about you, but like, I'm not worthy of worship. Actually, I do know about you. We're not worthy of worship. None of us. So all of this stuff, like, it's not about like being against those things. Those things are not bad. It's when our heart gets to a place where we have to have more and we start worshiping or idolizing that thing in our lives. So this is what we see in Colossians 3:1-5. Let's look at the whole context of what we just read. It says, "Since then, you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things." That's how we beat this. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. "For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry." So the core of this problem is when we don't set our mind on things above. We get completely obsessed with things that are worthless, you know? It is so easy to be so a part of this world 6 days a week, or 5 if you go to life group. And then when you come here, you're like, oh yeah, Jesus is the most important. But I think like what it takes to not be consumed by this is making all day, every day about non-earthly things, about things that are higher, things that are better. Like that's why God wants all of us. Not only because he's worthy of it, but also because it is best for us when he has all of us. Like it really changes our whole mindset on everything. So the opposite of greed here is worship, right? Because when you're idolizing something that's not worth it, the opposite of that is idolizing God. It's worshiping him. It's putting him as the most important place in our life. And it's being content with the things that we have, which is not a strong suit, right? Kids, did anyone have to teach you to want more stuff? Yeah, parents are laughing. No? Will, did anyone teach you to want more stuff, or did you just always want more stuff? He has thousands and thousands and thousands of toys, but you would still want more toys if somebody was like, hey, I got a toy for you, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, all of us are in that place, right? Like no one has to be told to want more. But I think John 3:30 tells us what this should look like. He says, he must become greater, I must become less. Instead of I want more for me, the heart is he deserves more of me. And that, I'll tell you, like that's where real contentedness comes from. Contentedness doesn't come from looking at your stuff and being like, it's good, that's enough for me. Contentedness comes from looking at things that are outside of that, realizing how dumb it is and being like, oh yeah, I'm good, you know? No motivational speaker is gonna get you to be okay with not having the next thing. God will, because he changes our heart. So what does this look like for us today? Because I have a feeling that all of the stuff that we have today makes us more greedy, not less greedy than the people that they were writing to back then, right? So having your needs met doesn't take care of this. Honestly, I think it might make it worse. And our whole culture is so broken in that. And the world today has so many people that are just insanely wealthy beyond anything that there's ever been in human history. All of us in this room have more nice stuff in our lives than like Pharaoh did. Yeah. You ever thought about that? It's only been like, I think 150 years since we've had toilets and showers. Isn't that wild to think about? Like when our shower breaks, we're like, gosh, like whose house am I going to? I can't do this. And they're like, you have a bucket. I'm like, okay, you know, like it doesn't take long for us to get there. But also, there's so much in our world today that is like so beyond that. Have any of you guys heard of the Sultan of Brunei? So the Sultan of Brunei is a small little country in like Southeast Asia. So the Sultan of Brunei owns approximately 7,000 luxury cars. His car collection is worth a little over $5 billion. And he has like warehouses all over Brunei just to hold his cars. And a lot of them, he forgot about the warehouse and it just went to just fell apart. Yeah, he just forgot about it. No one's taking care of him. He has an entire room full of Ferrari F50s that are like the most expensive Ferrari are up there. And like, they're all the same color. Yeah. Because it only comes in one color. And he just has literally all of the same car. Exactly. Why? I don't know. There's a Russian businessman named Roman Abramovich who owns a fleet of yachts. So he has a single yacht named Eclipse that's worth $1.5 billion with a B. And I don't know if you know much about yachts. It's a weird thing I like to watch on YouTube. Yachts usually cost 10% of the cost of the yacht to operate it per year. So he's spending $150 million a year just to use it. He also has 7 other yachts that travel with that yacht in a fleet. I guess so he can call it an armada. I don't know. He probably has some weird nickname. Bill Gates owns 269,000 acres of land in the U.S. He owns 1% of the country. So 1 out of every 100 acres in our country is owned by Bill Gates. This one blows me away. The king of Thailand, which if you've been to Thailand, we've been there. It's a little rough, pretty low income, a lot of people starving. The king of Thailand currently owns 38 private jets himself. Just for him, 38 private jets. Yeah, guys, greed is all around us. It is just such a staple thing in our world today, because when needs are met, you just go to wants, and wants never end. There's no amount of I've had enough because somebody else has more. And even those people, I'm guarantee you the king of Thailand who has 38 private jets is this is going to be the 39th. And he's probably paying some company to make one quicker so that the new one can come out and he can have it. I don't know, but it never ends. And that greed is baked into our culture so much so that we don't even see it, A month ago or so, I preached here on anger, and I told you guys the story of coming back to our house after a trip, and the guys that lived with us had thrown away chicken, and it made, it was that's haunted me for 3 weeks. I know, this smell is horrible, but I honestly don't even remember who it was. It probably was you, Parker, I don't know. I was trying to remember who it was. I honestly can't remember, but I remember getting home and being oh my gosh, it was probably Evan. Whoever it was, the whole house reeked, but that person couldn't smell it because they were so used to the smell of it. And I think more than all these other issues, that is greed for us. As a culture, we don't even understand greed. We can't even get it. We are so far past our needs being met that homeless people have more of their needs met than some of the richest people in other places of the world. And there is not a person in our country who is not richer than most of the people talked about here in Scripture. That's just wild that it's so baked into who we are that we just don't even see it. And we're yeah, but I'm not greedy. I don't always want more stuff. But it doesn't come down to the actual money. It comes down to the heart thing, So let me ask you guys a couple questions, just to kind of illustrate this, where greed is in our life. What's the point of getting a promotion at work? More money. Yeah. Why do we need more money? I think everyone here is pretty well fed, right? Some of us more than others. So why do you need, retirement, okay.
Buy more stuff.
Why do we need to buy more stuff?
Because the old stuff broke.
Why'd the old stuff break? Because we didn't take care of it. And it was made cheaply because they knew that you'd buy something new. Because we want something yesterday and we don't want to wait for it to be made. We want it to be now and affordable. And all of that stuff is absolutely true. So why would you need a nicer car?
So that you're more comfortable.
So you're more comfortable, better gas mileage, maybe. Yeah. We got a new truck a year ago, specifically because our old one was starting to have a couple little issues, and we're either we start fixing all this, or I don't know how to fix anything, so we get something that's going to last another whatever number of years. I was just we'll just get the base model. We don't need all the stuff in it. But geez, this thing's like a freaking transformer. My truck does so many things. And I'm man, you need seat heat and seat cooling and electric this and electric that. And it's nice. There's nothing wrong with that stuff. I love it. It's great. But why do we need it? Right? And the phone in your pocket, this thing, this has multiple times more processing power than the supercomputer that sent the Apollo missions into space. Isn't that wild? No, it's true. Like that supercomputer like is basically like a T85 calculator now. Like it didn't do a whole, you don't even know what that is. It's a graphing calculator. It's all right. Somebody over 40 will explain it to you later. But like, have you noticed that every time a new generation of these come out, it's just like a slightly better camera? Because we're just like out of stuff to put into them, you know? But we still want one every year. What would happen if Apple and Android, or if Apple and Samsung were like, not putting out a new one this year? You're like, how dare you? You're gonna stick me with a 16 for, you know, like, and there's nothing wrong with this. Like literally my best tool for ministry to share the gospel with people is this. This is an incredible tool, but if we get completely obsessed with it, that's the greed. Like that's where it becomes this thing where like I have to have the new one. So let me bring this to church here, okay? Why do we need speakers and guitars for worship? What? We don't? What else? Yeah, to reach more people, sure. Why else? Why do we need speakers and guitars? It's a culture or what? Yeah, we're in this culture, yeah. That's a real thing. I don't know about you, but I can't sing to save my life. And if the sound system is not louder than me, I will affect everyone around me in a negative way. I can make a joyful noise. That's what Scripture says. So the worship here is fine. But I don't want to ruin your worship because of my joyful noise, you know? So it's a good thing, but like, I mean, all of these things I think in church are the same. Like, why do we need to wear nice clothes here? Because we like to. Because it's honoring of God. I mean, because sometimes it's fun just to like dress up. Yeah. Why do we need the temperature to be comfortable in here? Yeah. It's not always that way, but who among us has not been like, gosh, it's going to be hot in there today, or it's going to be cold? Yeah. Yeah, that's a real thing. Why do we need running water? To fill the baptistry? Okay. There's lakes. Yeah. Why do we need a roof over our head? Like, listen, all of those things are great. And I think not only are they good things, like they actually help us to worship. They're tools that let our hearts like get over the junk. You know, if you're freezing cold, it's really hard to press past that and be like, God, I worship you, you know, like you've probably been there at some point. It's all good stuff. But at what point would we stop showing up here if those things went away? You know? And I'm actually kind of glad the temperature one hit so many of you guys because you're all still here. And the temperature in this room usually sucks, you know, like because our windows are tissue paper and have holes in them, you know? Like, so there are things about this place that are not comfortable. But at what point are we unable to worship because of those things? At what point are we like, well, if they don't put this thing, or if they don't work on this thing, or if this thing isn't right, I'm finding another church? I think that's a hard thing that all of us have to answer. And it's not just like, I'm not just saying that because I'm in leadership at this church. Like there's sometimes where I'm like, gosh, like, can we just get better at this? That stuff is not bad. But the heart that we come with and whether or not we let it stop our worship is the problem. That's where I think it turns into greed. Now, of all of those things, of all those people that we talked about earlier, like the Sultan of Brunei and all those people, the Sultan of Brunei is not greedy because he wants nice cars. He's greedy because he wants all the nice cars. You know, like it's not bad to have a nice car. I'm not saying go out and sell your car if you have a car, but like I think the question is like, what do I need to do what God's called me to do, and at what point is it greed? Because I don't know where it hits, but somewhere between 0 and 50 F-50s is greed, you know? It's probably the one, but let's not get into that. Roman Abramovich isn't greedy because he owns a boat. There are plenty of people in Tennessee who own a boat, you know? It's a little metal like soap dish, you know? He's greedy because he owns one boat that is worth more than the GDP of 20 countries on earth. That's a problem for one person. Bill Gates isn't greedy because he owns land. He's greedy because he owns all the land and he's trying to buy more. And the king of Thailand, this one's actually kind of like, it kind of messes with us a little bit. But think about it, like the king of Thailand needs a private jet. He can't fly commercial, you know? You don't want the king of a country or the president of a country to fly on Spirit Airlines. Like that is a horrible idea. And you would need to buy out the whole plane anyway, just with Secret Service, you know? Like, so having a private jet is not wrong, but 38, there's a problem in there, you know? Like, so at what point does this thing become greed? Because I think one of the issues that we slip into in the US is that we like have all this stuff and like we don't even understand or realize that we're greedy. But I think we also misdiagnose what is greed. And we just say having more money than me is greed. And it's not. It's the heart issue. You know? I don't know if you guys have paid attention to this or seen this. It's not on many news stations. Adults, kids don't Google this, but when you get home, search Africa and church burning. There are a ton of different churches and different Christians right now being killed overseas. I need to be really careful how to say this, but in Nigeria, literally thousands of Christians being murdered in very dark ways. And there's this video I saw of this church worshiping in their burnt down church building, where the walls are half there, the windows are all blown out, and they're just sitting on plastic chairs and worshiping God like nothing had shifted. Man, what if that was us? And we have all the stuff, and we still want more stuff. But also on the opposite end of the spectrum, like the people that have stuff doesn't necessarily mean that they're greedy. Over the last like 5 or 10 years, I don't even know why, like I have just become friends with some very wealthy people in Indianapolis. Like I don't know like why like that's a God thing. Like it just, he's connected me with people that are very wealthy. And I mean like top 1% of top 1% wealthy kind of people. And a couple of them are just some of the most godly people I've ever met in my life, which is shocking. Like first off, let me just say, I would not want money. Like I would be a terrible rich person. I think I would slip into greed in like 6 seconds. Like they have way more on their shoulders than I do. And like, I feel bad for them. But one guy, one of my friends, has so much money he doesn't have to work, and his wife has a bunch of health issues. And when you ask him what he does for a living, he calls himself a professional volunteer. Because literally all he does is go from ministry to ministry, just serving them and doing whatever he can for them. Like he literally does janitorial work for a ministry. Like he just serves these people, and he's the kind of guy you would never know was loaded. And he is very rich, but he just loves to serve. I have another friend who he gives away more every month than Autumn and I together make in a year. That's crazy. Like that's just wild that he gives that away. And he was talking about how he gives away more than his wife makes by quite a bit. That's nuts. And he lives in a smaller house than I do and drives a very regular car. It's really cool. It's really awesome. A really good friend of mine that I went to college with, our family got to go hang out with him in Dallas a couple months ago. And he, the next week, was leaving the country. And we're like, oh, where are you going? And he's like, oh, I'm going to the Middle East. I'm doing this mission trip thing. I was like, oh, great. Tell me about it. And he told me that he is going overseas to buy families out of slavery. Yeah, he's like, yeah, they're in slavery and it only costs this much per family to buy them out. So we are going and I'm buying families and we're releasing them. We're taking them out of the country as refugees and we're going to help them get on their feet. I'm like, what? Like, bro, we do very different mission trips. I love that. Like, I wish, like I would hope for us in this church that God would do that in us. That some of our people would make enough money to buy people out of slavery. How cool is that as a church? And if we draw a line and say, well, anyone who has more than X number of dollars is greedy, we completely miss that. And what if we were bashing people over the head because they had money and they're like, okay, well, great. I guess I'm not welcoming the kingdom of God because I have money. Like, no, like let's buy people out of slavery together. That's cool. You want to fund that? Let's do this thing. Because all of this comes down to this, like greed is an attitude of the heart. It is an attitude inside of us that says that this stuff is more important than God, that this world is more important than the next one, that temporary is more important than eternity. Like that's what greed is. It is a misalignment of worship. 1 Timothy 6, 9 through 10 says, those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. I have heard this verse so many times that rich people fall into temptation. It doesn't say that. It says people who want to get rich fall into temptation. You can be very poor and want to get rich. It also says not money is the root of all evil. It's the love of money is the root of all evil. Like how many times have we heard that verse taken out of context, right? Or not even taken out of context, just not said clearly. Yeah, just wrong. Exactly. Ecclesiastes 5:10 says, whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. It's a little encouraging to me that Ecclesiastes, Old Testament, people were the same as they are today. Yeah, we didn't learn anything. I guess that's not encouraging. But yeah, there's nothing new under the sun. Straight up at Ecclesiastes, you're right. I think the real question here is, what are you worshiping? Because some of the greediest people on earth are the poorest people on earth. And some of the wealthiest people on earth are the greediest people on earth. And some of the most middle-classiest people on earth are the greediest on earth. It's a heart thing, right? So how do we shift our heart? And I think the answer to that, I kind of said earlier, it's just being content. Like, how do we as people learn to be content with what we have? How do we worship God with what we have and not worship the stuff around us? Hebrews 13:5 says, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. So, can you put that back on the screen for a sec? Or is it on the screen? If not, I can just read it. You're good. There we go. So look at this really quick, because it looks like two very different topics. Keep your lives free from the love of money. Be content with what you have. Never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. Like how, like it doesn't sound like it makes much sense out of context, but it's saying the way that you stay away from all of this stuff, from the love of money, from the greed in your heart, is to realize that God's never leaving you. And that is so much better. Yeah. And when you compare the junk that this world has to offer, when you look on Amazon for half an hour and then read scripture for half an hour, read through Proverbs, which one's going to fulfill you more? Yeah. Open boxes from Amazon for half an hour and then read Proverbs. Like, it's still the same thing. Like, one might get your heart racing a little bit more. Like, there's nothing like opening a box. Like, I'm with you. I don't know why, but there's something like, oh my gosh, you know? But it just doesn't last, right? Because the next day you want to order something else. But never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. That's what fixes that in us. Paul says it this way. Philippians 4:12 through 19. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. So let me ask you a question. How many of you guys have heard that verse, I can do all things through him who gives me strength, on like a motivational poster, on a bumper sticker, on like a football thing where it's like, I can do all things through him who gives me strength, let's go! Like, this is not motivational poster. Like, and it's almost like sickening to see it used that way because of the context.
Yeah.
The context of I can do all things through him who gives me strength is I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. Think about that. This is Philippians. Paul is literally in chains as he's writing this. He is on house arrest, chained up, like on his way to death pretty soon. And he's saying, I've had no food before. I've literally been starving, and I was okay. And I had food, and I was okay. And I had a house, and I was okay. And I was homeless, and I was okay. Because I've learned that when I focus on God, all that stuff is secondary. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Totally different aspect, right? Like totally shifts the way that we see this thing. So learn it, or read this again. Let's learn this. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things, all of this, through him who gives me strength. What would it look like if we as the church, like, we're genuinely not greedy? Like, we're okay having a new car if it was the best way to do what God's called us to, but we're also okay having a junker if it was the best thing that God's called us, the best thing for what God's called us to. What would it look like to be fine getting the new iPhone, but also to be fine having the one that's old, What would it look like if we saw our paycheck as a way to invest in something bigger and better and not just like something that we have to use for stuff that we want? I think one of the most challenging questions Autumn and I have ever asked ourselves is, how much money do we need to live on? That sounds like a very normal number or normal question, but no one ever asked themselves that question. They think, how much can I do with the money I have? You ever thought about that? Like, what if we actually asked ourselves the question, what's my limit? Like, what's the number that I need? And then what do we do with the rest, God? We've got our 10% that goes out first because that's our first fruit, that's our tithe, that's what we give to the church. But then what do we need to live on? Because it's probably not 90%. So what's our number? And then, God, what do we do with the rest of this? Who do you want to bless? How many people do you want us to buy out of slavery? Like, that's a real question. You don't have to be rich to do that. How many people do you want me to support going on a mission trip? How many homeless people do you want me to pick up and take to lunch? How many people do you want me to buy coffee for as I'm doing discipleship with them? How much money do you want me to put in a savings account for my kids? How much do you want me to serve this person with or that person with? Or how much do you want me to send to this nonprofit or help this thing? Like, we just live in so much abundance that we forget that there's a number that we need. And we just look at income as an ever fluctuating and hopefully ever growing thing. But need is very different than want. And I think that's the thing that honestly God has just hit me with in this, is how are we truly, like, really investing in the kingdom? And how much are we seeing money as just something I just always want more of, or time as something I just always want more of, or influence as something I always want more of? Like, what if we were asking God, like, how much do you want me to have? What do you want me to do with it? I think that would change our lives, really. And on the connection card, we have a few things that I think could change our lives. The first thing is I'll truly search my heart and see if I'm actively living in greed. We are. I'll answer that one for you. We are. We've got a lot we need to shift. The second one is I'll commit to trust in God and stop trusting in things. If our paycheck went away and God called us to that, do you think he'd take care of us? It's shocking how much he does. The third thing is I won't allow greed in my life to lead me into another sin. And that's such an easy thing to do too, is when we give ourselves to greed,